So, Stuti, thanks for making time for this at short notice. An approved list of battery manufacturers, if I got that right. I mean, for sort of a layperson, it's kind of a boring acronym, I would say, but I think the significance of the news for entrepreneurs like you and for the broader sort of battery energy tech ecosystem in the country is quite significant. So, over to you right away. Walk us through in simple terms why this is significant.
Firstly, thank you so much, Hari, for having me on this platform again to share my views. And very rightly said, 2 weeks ago when this news came out, I think sent a lot of positive waves across the ecosystem because it's something that a lot of people in the industry, various stakeholders have been pushing out for a long time. Because given the geopolitical scenario as well, I think energy security as a theme has really taken to the forefront. And for a country like India, this move really is in the right direction to ensure we move towards energy independence and not just, go from importing oil to importing lithium-ion batteries, for which, as we all know, supply chain is really skewed. Only one country controls around 90 to 92% of the whole supply chain, right from mining and cell chemistry to the final product, right? And this list is essentially, in very simple terms, it's like government will shortlist a few selected players who are meeting the required, compliance standards for localized supply chain, who are actually building in India throughout the value chain, and then give them preference on the government tenders because there's a huge demand that the government sees for grid scale energy storage, and even beyond that, where lithium ion batteries or other batteries can be used across mobility, electronics, etc. And of late, we have seen a lot of vanilla players enter into this industry who have no history of working in the energy space but are still participating for tenders just on the hope of getting the whole, battery and system from China and just deploying it here. So this move is definitely in the right direction. Government has taken an inspiration from what they have done in the solar industry, which is put out ALMM, that was approved list of models and manufacturer for solar panels. They are trying to do the same thing for the battery industry as well.
Okay, yeah. You already mentioned that there is precedence, I think, back in 2019. I just tried to look up when they did the solar, and that has had some good impact, right? I mean, it has definitely boosted the local industry, and now we're at a point where even cell manufacturing is going to pick up. I mean, in the photovoltaic cell manufacturing. So, in the context of the battery energy storage, do you anticipate that similarly there'll be a sort of a good impact on localization, reducing import dependence?
Yeah, this is, as I said, definitely a step in the right direction. But it all boils down to the exact execution. I think a similar story we saw with the FAME 2 subsidies for EVs as well, wherein policy promoted localization, but industry somehow found a workaround until the government came and stopped the support altogether. So I think a good sort of area of focus here would also be to look at not just lithium ion, on which India for sure does not have adequate lithium, nickel, and cobalt reserves to just, make 100% of the value chain fully indigenous, but also look at non-lithium ion chemistries, be it iron air, that's something MEINE Electric is building, or even companies who are working with sodium and zinc, right? So leveraging the Indian mineral powerhouse to get to better chemistries should definitely be one of the areas of focus, which will propel us to meet the overall objectives of this policy direction.
Yeah, and I want to tell our viewers and audience that Stuti has actually put out an insightful post which kind of summarizes all the important points, which you can find on her LinkedIn page. In fact, I stumbled upon that post, and that got me interested in learning more about this, and here we are. So that brings me to MEINE Electric, and you have specifically mentioned how companies like yours can also sort of take advantage of this if the rules actually come through. Can you walk us through that? You just mentioned how not don't consider just lithium ion, but also other chemistries. And in your post also, you've said iron air batteries, for example, are already 95%
Yes.
indigenous. So give us a sense of what this means for your company.
Yeah. So again, as I mentioned, even this policy is looking at, a full value chain play. They are not just saying only do the manufacturing of cell, blocks in-house or only do the recycling in-house. They have actually gone from critical minerals to recycling the whole value chain, right? And in that case, we all know, as I mentioned, for lithium ion, we have certain areas of this value chain which, even if we want to, cannot be fully indigenized. And that's where our technology, that is iron air, comes into picture. Even today, like iron air simply is using iron as the main material, which is very much cheap and very much abundant in India. That means we are not just going to meet the localization threshold. If the policy goes on and say, hey, I want 25% or 50% or 60% localization, it will be tough for lithium ion manufacturers to meet that threshold. But with chemistries like ours, we are meeting that threshold on day zero, right? And that is why I think this is a big move for startups like ours who are building in alternate chemistries.
If one sort of totals up all whatever numbers are available from the different states of 1 megawatt hour capacity plus, and I think government has given those numbers, and that adds up to less than 1 gigawatt of available battery energy storage. Correct me if I'm wrong today. And but I think the ambition is to like go to some really big numbers. Can you quickly walk us through that?
Yeah. So you are very correct in quoting the number. The actual deployed battery energy storage today is less than a gigawatt. That is partly a function of, overall project timelines. Like once a tender is through, it takes around 12 to 24 months to actually deploy the asset and get it operational. And most of the tenders we have seen come out in the last 2 to 3 years itself. So partly a function of capital work in progress, but partly also a function of the way we have seen the tender ecosystem evolve in the last few years, right? Every other month, every other day, there was a news headline which told about record low tariffs, tariff of 1 rupee, 2 rupee per kilowatt hour. And anyone who knows even a little bit about lithium ion batteries was like, how is this possible? Even with viability gap funding, this tariff does not make sense. And the reason why these tariffs were so low was because there were non-legacy players. If you look at companies who have been awarded these tariffs, you won't recognize any name which has, been in energy industry. And they were projecting that lithium-ion prices will continue to fall the way they have fallen in the last 5 to 10 years, and this trend will continue. But what we are seeing really is that lithium-ion is already at its bottom threshold. In fact, some people are expecting the prices will go up given the restrictions China has put and given the way geopolitics is shaping out, right? So actually, out of the overall tenders announced, around 19% of the capacity was actually awarded and then cancelled. So these are projects which will never see the light of the day. And partly this move of recognizing certain vendors who can be part of this approved list is also a function of, all that we have seen happening in the tender ecosystem, because you can make all the hype and, headlines about new tenders being awarded. It does not change the metric if those battery assets or that energy infrastructure never gets deployed, right? It's all effort wasted.
Hmm. Okay. And I also want to add one more number here. We were talking about less than 1 gigawatt hour available, and I
We
think
expect 47 gigawatt of
yeah,
target under the scheme, yes. And that's
yeah,
a
and
huge number, but I think very much achievable if, we move in the right direction for a
yeah,
country like India, which already has a huge renewable capacity as well.
yeah, and the Ministry of Power also estimates something like more than 200 gigawatt hours of battery energy storage required, projected by 2030 or something like that, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
the difference between gigawatt and gigawatt hour is also like an area where long duration storage comes into picture, because lithium ion projects are just 2 to 4 hour storage currently. If let's say for the same power, for the same gigawatt, iron air gets deployed, it will be 1 megawatt, 18 megawatt hours. So the number of hours essentially is what matters the most.
And these rules, if they actually sort of are brought into force, it will create a real visibility for hardware companies like you. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Sure. So I think in India we have a funding gap, right? On one hand, through PLIs, we are funding these huge giga factories, but the overall tech, machinery, process, everything is imported. And on the other hand, we have startups such as ours who need that capital to set up and scale the technology, bring it to the forefront. When we are raising funds, one of the primary thing that the investors ask for is demand visibility. Who would buy it? What would be the scale? Is the government looking at, energy storage seriously, or long duration energy storage, or are these just, just like few projects and after that the world will move on from renewables, etc. So what this policy really does is sort of solidify the signal that government is looking at energy storage quite seriously, right? The $38 billion projected investment is a number that's coming from government into the energy storage side. Of course, it will be divided across different chemistries. It will be divided across different use cases, but it is still a very big number and a very huge signal. Uh, we are also seeing a lot of focus on energy storage and other policies like the National Electricity Plan draft that recently came about. There was a whole section about energy storage, which also particularly mentioned long duration energy storage. So essentially, with these, we have a real intent and signal that the government will put out tenders for energy storage systems. The government will support these battery technologies through viability gap funding, through production linked incentives, etc. And that's exactly what startups like ours would be eligible once we have proven the core chemistry and come to actual scale and deployment.
And you are very much part of this industry, and through your network, do you have a sense of how quickly this may actually happen?
So I think the government is also looking at moving towards it within this fiscal year or next fiscal year itself. To be honest, this overall projected number is accumulation of all the support through different schemes as well. So we see viability gap funding around 3,700 crores of initial corpus has already been committed in this financial year itself. We have PLI scheme for advanced chemistry, which is already out there. Of course, some revisions are very much required for other startups also to access these schemes. But yeah, I think we are moving in the right direction. We should see the effect of this in the next 1 to 2 years. We are already seeing, tenders for, say, a 6-hour storage as well, which was recently put out in this year. We are already seeing, a lot of focus on this from a policy perspective in policies like National Electricity Plan, etc. So definitely should materialize into a good benefit in the next 1 to 2 years.
Okay, super insightful, Stuti. Very quick conversation. Any one last point that you want to highlight?
Yeah. So while on paper this policy is in the right direction, I think some changes are still to be worked upon. For example, even though viability gap funding is proposed, the clear mechanism for this to be, accessible to other non-lithium chemistries also needs to be worked out. Similarly, we are already having, tenders put out by state governments as well for battery storage. But again, these tenders have thresholds, or like they are built around lithium-ion characteristics, right? Having, let's say, 2 cycles a day, 85% RT. That is not something that typical long duration energy storage chemistries deliver. So maybe a look is required into that, because then even if someone puts out a tender for a 12-hour storage, which is something, let's say, our technology, iron air, can deliver, we won't be hitting the RT and other characteristics of lithium-ion, so we won't be able to participate in it, right? And yeah, of course, PLI is another debate altogether. I think we need to change the eligibility norm so that it's not just the giants in the industry who can put the initial capex and enjoy PLI benefits, but also hardware startups like ours who can avail the benefits and get actual capital subsidy to scale the manufacturing which is required. So I think it will all boil down to execution, even though the policy is right on the paper.